Let's talk about TikTok because the British government banned the social media app today from all official devices. Joe Biden, of course, moved on this some weeks ago. The US regulators are concerned that TikTok's owners, ByteDance, have connections with the Chinese Communist Party, who might use the app to access sensitive data, an allegation the company strongly denies. Nonetheless, the EU has followed suit, and the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, was under pressure to follow their example. Yes, you can read all about that on the BBC's TikTok feed. Just don't access it if you're a civil servant. Let's speak to Emily Taylor. She's CEO of the cyber intelligence company Oxford Information Labs. She's editor of Chatham House's Journal of Cyber Policy. Welcome to you. Thanks for being with us. I mean, that's a serious point, though. Companies like ours are piling thousands of pounds developing TikTok feeds, and governments are taking it off devices.
Yes, it is. It's a really tough one, and you can see from Oliver Dowden's language that it's very muted. You know, this is precautionary, it's proportionate, and so on. That doesn't sound very smoking gun. So why cut off one of the fastest growing, most popular social media apps to government employees? Government needs to be in touch with people and needs to be communicating, especially to young people. But it's hard to tell at the moment whether this is geopolitics or cybersecurity or a mix of both. Well,
what they're obviously concerned about is the Communist Party in China hoovering up data that comes to ByteDance, which is a Chinese-owned company. That's the concern. How far does that concern spread? Is it limited just to government circles, or will corporates start looking at this and thinking, well, hang on, we've got some sensitive data on our servers?
Well, you know, all social media platforms make their money by harvesting loads of data and finding out all about us. And of course, when the context is that the ownership of that company is Chinese, and there could be leakage or sharing of that data with the Chinese Communist Party, an environment where there are very weak rule of law constraints on the government and grave human rights risks, it really makes you sit up and think, you know, are there real risks? There are some cybersecurity reports that have been saying that TikTok as an app does collect an awful lot more data than comparative other apps, you know, the popular social media apps. But there isn't a huge amount of data. We wait for the National Cybersecurity Centre's report that Oliver Dowden mentioned. But, you know, I think that we've now normalised the collection of data at this vast scale. But when you get the context of TikTok, it does make you sit up and wonder, what are the human rights risks? What are the cybersecurity risks?
Yeah, what about the First Amendment, Doug High? Freedom of speech. This is what people want to defend in America. Would it make a difference if ByteDance was sold to an American company?
Well, politically, it certainly would. And I think that would take a lot of the political pressure off. But we still have that challenge of public information and what you're able to do with a public phone versus a private phone, which, I mean, when I worked in government, I would have a phone issued to me by the United States Senate or the House of Representatives. Certainly members of the Biden administration or the Trump administration, for that matter, had the same thing. What you did on your personal phone, whether it was music you were downloading, videos or things like that with TikTok, that's a very different question of what you're doing with what we call the official phone. It's a government phone. You're only able to use it for very specific government purposes, sometimes personal, like the Hillary Clinton emails. Yes, you can, you know, confirm dinner reservations with your daughter, but there are things that you can't do, and certainly political and campaign activities involved in that as well. Those questions still remain, not just here in Washington, but in all 50 states, where you're starting to see governors more and more ban TikTok from state phones as well. It's the same issue of official versus private.
How does this decision, Anam, fit with the review of defence and security, which the British government conducted this week? They published new guidelines on how we deal with China. Is this part of that?
Well, it's linked. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because that refresh of the integrated review was seen by most people as a softening of the Prime Minister's position on China, because, of course, during the Tory leadership contest, he'd adopted a very, very hawkish position. So most people saw this as a more pragmatic approach. But, of course, as ever in British politics, the Prime Minister will find himself under pressure from MPs. So the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China, which is a cross-party, cross-parliamentary group of members of the House of Lords and MPs, is today saying, you know, we're not sure that TikTok complies with our data protection laws across the board. So it shouldn't simply be a question of ministers' phones or civil servants' phones. They want to have an inquiry into whether TikTok complies with data privacy more broadly. So, you know, there will be pressure on him. I think he's trying to steer a difficult course here. My sense is that the Prime Minister himself wants to be pragmatic. He understands the need to engage with and work with China. There are many on his backbenchers who would like to see him take a far more hawkish position, though.
Yeah, might explain why they've taken so long to get to this position. Emily, we're talking about data, but of course we have our suspicions about Facebook, Twitter, and the way the algorithms work and the way they point us towards the news they want us to see. How do we feel about an increasingly important social media app being controlled by the Chinese in that context?
I think it's all very uncomfortable. And, you know, the TikTok app seems to be extraordinarily addictive, really, really good at putting people together with content that they will find appealing. That keeps them on the platform. Young people are accessing the platform on average 19 times a day, and on average spending 75 minutes a day on the app. And, you know, parents that I've been speaking to say that's a real underestimate of what they see their children.
My daughter's on it way more.
Yeah. And so, you know, that is pointing you to some very razor-sharp algorithms. The fact that TikTok is saying it's removing 96% of bad content, you know, the sort of content you really don't want to see on social media platforms before it's even reported, also highlights an extraordinary capability in data processing. The other side of that is, of course, those capabilities can be used against individuals or groups of people or for profiling, and can pose cybersecurity and societal risks as well.
OK, we'll have to leave that there. Emily Taylor, thank you very much indeed for that.